Dear colleagues, while you're at home, I take you on a journey through the changing landscape of engineering education. It has nothing to do with the disruption by the COVID-19 pandemic. But also this disruption makes it so clear how important it is that you know where you want to go. Because if you want to strive and thrive as a university, you have no other option than to reinvent yourself through a future-centric mindset. It's not so much where you stand, but in what direction you are moving. This is about long-term thinking, thinking from the end backwards. Here you see how I studied aerospace engineering in the 70s, listening in classrooms, watching the overhead sheet, copying the notes from the chalkboard, using a slide ruler or even a pocket calculator. I learned how to do things, solving problems step by step to get the right answer, coding algorithms in a pile of punch cards and making the computations on a mainframe computer. Everything was focused on the how and the when in engineering. Understanding certainty, developing order, analyzing, optimizing. If you compare that with today, things have really changed. Especially how we teach, with PowerPoint, blended learning, flipped classrooms, remote labs, online exams, etc. But we have hardly changed what we teach. Don't you find it shocking that much of what we teach today is about the same as 50 years ago? It is about how to design and build machines for the second industrial revolution. Teaching how we have always done. And why? Because it is so much easier to teach them for our past than for their future. For decades we have been thinking that the future is just a linear extension of the present. But it isn't. Think about the information society we are in. Think about the smartphone and the tablets with all the apps. Launched in 2007, in less than 10 years, we are all a prisoner of the smartphone. No, future is definitely not a linear extension, not a speedier version of the present day. We are living in an era of accelerating change. It means we can make a useful prediction for a future of about 5 years or so, not more. It's getting pretty complex and opaque when you want to forecast the way of working, living, traveling, doing business 10 years from now. And it's really getting chaotic when you think 15 years from now. That's unimaginable. Still, society expects that you and I prepare our students for a life 15 years from now at least. And the big question is, how? We can hardly imagine how professional life will look like. But can we wait till the future is there? No, of course not. Because it is our task to shape that future. The knowledge and skills we are teaching today are not the ones that the job market needs for sustainable employment and lifelong learning. For this, people also need skills to cope with uncertainties and change, like problem definition, holistic thinking, self-reliance, creativity, correlating chaos, agility, handling ambiguity, and failure. Here you see a list of engineering attributes that are coming at us in alphabetical order, because priority may differ when you work in engineering business, in design, or in a scientific environment. It makes clear why there are so many complaints also about the mismatch in the skills of young graduates. It is difficult to break up well-established programs and build new ones, I know, in an academic culture of traditions and disciplinary silos, with staff that has been selected on academic excellence. But do we have a choice? No, we don't, because not only society wants us to change, also the students want us to change. The current generation is a different breed than the millennials. They are harder workers than the millennials, have higher expectations, desire tailored paths that suit them, are stronger in build-yourself careers, always eager to build in a distinctive curriculum vitae. They want to study for a future job that matters for society and contributes to the common good. They want to learn things that are relevant for their life and their career. And by default of course, everything they have to learn shall be short, relevant, tailored to their personal aspirations and interests, put in the right context, and of course, available online 24/7. Changing needs, changing desires, changing context. I've made a framework for a modern curriculum. First, of course, there is the rigor of engineering. And that's the red disc we all know. This is our strength. And also in future, technical depth is more important than ever. Deep knowledge of engineering fundamentals is the technology literacy. But that's not sufficient. In this world, there can be no rigor without data literacy, without the skills also to communicate, to collaborate. You can't be an engineer. And that's what I mean with human literacy. But secondly, there is the blue disk, with the growing need for interdisciplinary and systems thinking, to tackle complex societal challenges, to engineer highly advanced machines and systems and processes for the 21st century. And thirdly, there is a loud call from society and engineering business for innovation skills and entrepreneurial behavior. That's the light gray disk on the right. Last but not least, there is a need for a set of common core skills with engineering ethics, cultural agility and creativity. And of course, I shouldn't forget to mention that also critical thinking has always been and will always be a key skill for an academic engineer. With the above in mind, a think tank of 20 academic staff, students and engineering professionals at my university explored if the engineering profession will need the same kind of engineers in 2030 as we are educating today. As I just explained, we already know that students want more flexibility and personalized paths. Does every student in engineering then still have to learn the same skills, the same thing? If you make a comparison with a soccer team, we are not training everybody to become a good keeper and a good defender and a good attacker, are we? So why should we? On the other hand, I also know that brilliant soccer players often play better if they once also performed other sports. So we should not pigeonhole. And the outcome of the think tank was, yes, in 2030 engineering business will need different engineers with a different profile than today. And in this slide, I show them on the curriculum framework that I just presented. At the bottom of the figure, you see the research specialist 2.0. He is the expert thinker we all know today, the specialist under the hood. But in 2030, he shall have a more open mind and be able and understand the impact of his specialism in a much broader sense. Much broader than today. And he shall also be able to communicate with laymen and experts and collaborate in teams. On the left-hand side, we see the systems integrator. Engineering business tells us that the more and deeper the technical specializations get, the more systems integrators and system architects will be needed. And these people need breadth, systems perspective, holistic thinking, be strong in complex communication and teamwork, be agile and resilient. And finally, on the right-hand side, we see the front-end innovator with broad knowledge in engineering and socio-economic factors, an entrepreneurial attitude, who has learned to co-create with solutions in team of specialists, design engineers, system integrators, customers and business and people managers, strong in complex communication and good empathetic listening skills. We have validated these roles in workshops with HR managers, CEOs and innovators, and they confirmed that these indeed are the roles that are already and will be in high demand in the next decade. The question is, what do you think this investigation by the think tank led to in my organization? Will it be a reaction of, there we go again, I've seen that before? No, wrong. My organization adopted this vision. And right now, all programs are developing a framework for Master Education 2030 to implement these 3 roles for all disciplines we have here in our university. So, that's our plan till 2030. I guess you know that universities change slowly, and therefore we have put ourselves the next question. What is the vision for the next 10 years after 2030? And that means we are really challenging the unimaginable future at the very top right in this picture, with much more higher uncertainties than we had for 2030. Finding out what engineering roles will be in demand in 2040. Finding out what that would mean for the organization of education. That is really long-term thinking, and thinking without box, no box. And so we started a new chapter in 2018, the chapter of reframing engineering education, where my think tank had started with the question, if we would need the same kind of engineers in 2030 as today. This time we decided to start from a very different perspective, namely, what type of behavior of engineers will be meaningful in society 2040? Will the engineers still have the same meaning, do the same activities, need the same skills? Or will they be very different? And what would that mean for the organization? In other words, we did not longer put the engineering roles in the center of our thinking, as we did in the think tank, but we made society the center of engineering and worked backwards to the present day. This change in perspective made the whole of a difference. Because to understand the desired behavior of engineers in 2040, you first have to understand the context in 2040. What will society look like? Next, we have to discover what the interaction between the new engineer and that society may be, and then design the behavioral traits of the engineer. I feel your skepticism. Isn't that pie in the sky with such high uncertainties? Well, let me explain. In 7 league boots, we made the following steps. We used the reframing methodology, vision in project design. That's a scientific methodology developed by the Delft professors Hackert and Van Dijk in 2011. And Professor Van Dijk is in our team. We gathered as much information as possible to construct an image of the society in 2040. We read piles of books and literature about trends in society and technology, about how future society might look like in 20 to 30 years from now. We interviewed 10 game changers, influencers, visionaries, philosophers, professional engineers and researchers on the impact of science and technology on society, all from Western Europe. And from this we got about 300 observations, thoughts, theories, laws, considerations, scientific insights, all related to science and technology, education and society. And we clustered those, and then we worked backwards to the present day. And then we discovered 3 main dimensions. 3 dimensions that we think will drive engineers to engage with and contribute to society in 2040. That we think will be a measure how society will, let's say, experience and appreciate engineers in 2040. And finally, we validated the outcome with more than 50 academic and professional stakeholders, where we looked at relevance, ethical usefulness, strategic value and inspirational value. The 3 dimensions, they are source of engagement, trust in collaboration and the development cycle. The vertical axis tells us about the intrinsic motivation why people choose for engineering, science and technology. It is the engagement dimension. On one side of the spectrum we find people who perform best when they find their purpose in solving societal problems. That's the challenge side. And on the other side we find the scientific, nerdy engineers who are more intrigued by understanding a physical phenomenon in every tiny detail. That's the phenomena side. The axis from lower left to upper right tells us about what type of collaboration people prefer. On the right hand side we find people who feel happy in a system that is stable, where everything is well arranged, where collaboration is built on structure and trust. It's the system side. On the left hand side we have people who are allergic for systems, take personal initiative, rely heavily on interpersonal contact. And the axis from upper left to lower right is time related. It tells us about the type of work environment people prefer. Fast changing or steady and slow. On one side we have engineers who feel engaged when they work in slow developments that need time, patience and endurance, the slow side. And on the other side we see engineers who are entrepreneurial and move on to the next big thing as soon as they can. These 3 dimensions are like the RGB colors. They cover the full spectrum of engineering behavior, and every individual is a combination of these colors. Try to image these dimensions, create a space for 8 cubes, where each cube represents an engineering profile with 1 value for each dimension. For instance, a combination of phenomenon, system and fast, or challenge, system and slow. And for each we have described the special behavioral traits and performance that describe how an engineer in that specific role engages with and contributes to society in 2040, and how society perceives and appreciates them. If you want to implement this vision in our education, should we then offer a curriculum through which students can play these 8 different roles? Or should they specialize in just one? How can we get the students in the driver's seat of learning and promote self-directed learning in the context of this choice? How can we teach the combination of self-growth, about who you are, who you want to be, what you do and how you show up? And societal purpose, about scientific, technological knowledge. Do you expect an organization of disciplinary silos full of experts will do the job? We foresee a shared playground of, let's say, 3 institutes that offer education in these 3 dimensions. One about engagement, one about trust in collaboration, and one about pace of development. And it's our vision that each learner, who can be a freshman student or a professional who wants to upskill, and this is really important, that each learner takes agency over his own learning. to orientate on the roles and make some big decisions. This shared playground is what we call the personology arena, from personality and technology, in which not science and technology, but the behavioral traits guide the learner in the study path he wants to follow, in which the three institutes steer the self-development, in which the engineering departments take the role of transferring the scientific knowledge. And this is about where we are in our innovation journey in engineering education. Nowadays, we make the preparation for a prototype of a master's that has these three dimensions in mind, as a stepping stone to future university in 2040, with the Vice President of Education of our university on board. I have 4 takeaways for you. The first one is to raise awareness that engineering education is on the verge of a major transformation. Each future-proof program shall include the rigor of engineering, interdisciplinary and systems thinking, and innovation and entrepreneurial behavior. The second one is about the education up till 2030, where engineering is still at the center of society, where 3 engineering roles will be in high demand: the broader research specialist 2.0, the systems integrator, and the front-end innovator. The third one is about engineering education in 2040, where society will be the center of engineering, where engineering roles are no longer focused on science and technological knowledge, but on behavioral traits that drive engineers in their job, and that society expects and appreciates from engineers. And the fourth, and maybe the most important takeaway, is that also in this world of very high uncertainties, long-term thinking and thinking with no box is so important. Navigating the changing landscape and discovering where you are going, where you want to go, also in times of big uncertainty. Dare to paint your spot on the horizon. Dare to shape that unimaginable future for your program. Empower your colleagues to innovate education and empower your students to discover their future career. Give them the flexibility and the freedom, and feed your organization with your original ideas. My higher management celebrates long-term thinking. They nurture a take the lead and lead the change culture. And I guess also your management would celebrate and advise any advice that can sharpen their vision and strategy for the changing paradigm of higher education. You have to play a role here. Remember, it's not so much where you stand as in what direction you are moving. Thank you.